The night was cold in the north, but it was nothing compared to the cold growing inside Jon Snow. He stood alone on the walls of Winterfell, looking down at the torches burning in the yard below. Soldiers were laughing. They believed in victory. They believed in their king. They believed in Robb Stark. And that was the problem. Jon had always lived in the shadow of his brother. No, his half-brother. That word had followed him like a curse since he was a child. Bastard, Snow, not Stark, not truly family. Even when they were boys running through the snow of Winterfell, laughing and fighting with wooden swords, there was always a line between them. Robb was the heir of House Stark, Jon was the mistake. Robb never treated him badly. That almost made it worse. Robb would smile at him, train with him, trust him. He would say, "You're my brother." Like it was that simple. Like blood did not matter. Like the world outside those walls did not whisper and stare. But the world did whisper. And now, the world was at war. Robb had been crowned king in the north. The soldiers shouted his name. The banners flew high with the direwolf. Men would die for him. They already had. And Robb carried the weight like it was made for him. He had that Stark look. That Stark honor. Jon had honor too, but honor had never given him a name. When Robb called him to the great hall that night, Jon already knew something had changed. The fire crackled loudly between them. Shadows moved across Robb's face. He looked tired, older than his years. "I need you by my side," Robb said. "Not as my brother, as my commander. Commander, not brother." Jon felt something twist in his chest. "And what would I command?" "The vanguard," Robb answered. "You'll lead the first charge when we march south again." The first charge. The most dangerous position. The place where men died first. Robb spoke as if it were an honor. Maybe it was. Maybe any other man would have felt pride. But Jon only felt it clearly then. He was useful, disposable, brave enough to die. "And if I fall?" Jon asked quietly. Robb frowned. "You won't." "That's not what I asked." Robb's jaw tightened. "If you fall as a Stark." That word again, Stark. It was always offered when death was near. Jon looked into the fire instead of at his brother. He remembered how Catelyn Stark used to look at him. Not with anger, not even with hate, just cold distance. A reminder that he did not belong. Even now, she barely spoke to him unless she had to. Jon realized something that night. Robb trusted him completely, and that trust was power. Later, when the camp had gone quiet, a rider arrived under darkness. Not flying, Lannister red, not wearing northern gray. Neutral colors. Careful colors. Jon met the rider outside the walls. The man did not bow. "I bring an offer," he said. "For the bastard of Winterfell." Jon's hand went to his sword. "Choose your next words carefully." The man smirked. "You fight for a brother who will never give you his name. You bleed for a cause that will end with your death. But there are others who see your value." Jon should have killed him then, should have cut his throat and sent his head to Robb as proof of loyalty. Instead, he listened. The offer was simple. Information. A gate left unguarded during the next march. A change in formation, a small mistake that could break Robb's army at the right moment. In return, land, a title, a true name. No more snow. Jon told himself he was only pretending to listen, only learning what the enemy planned. He told himself he would report everything to Robb in the morning, but he did not. All night he stood awake, staring into the dark fields beyond Winterfell. He imagined a future where men knelt to him, where no one whispered bastard, where he was not second to anyone. He thought about how easily Robb had chosen his path. King. Leader. Stark. Jon's path had always been chosen for him. Until now. Morning came gray and bitter. The army prepared to march. Horses snorted in the cold air. Steel clinked. Men prayed to the old gods. Robb rode beside John as they left the gates. "I'm glad you're with me," he said quietly. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Those words almost broke him. Almost. John nodded, his face calm. "You won't have to find out." As the army moved south, John felt the weight of the message hidden in his cloak. The instructions, the betrayal waiting to happen. One signal, one moment. That was all it would take to change the fate of the North. And as the banners of the direwolf flapped in the cold wind, John wondered if he was about to become the villain of his own story, or finally the hero of it. The choice was coming, faster than he expected, and once made, there would be no going back. The march south felt longer than it should have. The wind cut through armor and fur like a knife, but John barely noticed the cold anymore. His mind was louder than the sound of hooves crushing frozen earth. Every step forward felt like a step deeper into something dark. Robb rode ahead most of the time, speaking with his lords, planning routes, discussing scouts and supply lines. Men looked at him with respect, with loyalty, with belief. It was strange how belief could blind people. John kept touching the folded piece of parchment hidden inside his glove. The message had been simple. During the next battle, the left flank would push harder than expected. Robb's forces would stretch thin. There would be a moment, a brief, dangerous moment, when the center would be exposed. If John delayed his charge just enough, if he hesitated instead of advancing, the enemy would break through. Thousands could die in that hesitation. Robb could die, and the North would fall. They made camp near a shallow river 2 nights later. Scouts had reported enemy movement ahead. A battle was coming soon. You could feel it in the air. The men were quieter now. Laughter had faded. Even the horses seemed uneasy. That night, Robb sat beside John near the fire. No lords, no guards. Just the two of them like when they were boys. "Do you remember when we used to sneak into the crypts?" Robb asked suddenly. John almost smiled. "You were the one who said the statues moved." Robb let out a small laugh. "I was trying to scare you. You failed." "I know. You never scared easily." John stared into the flames. "That wasn't true. He scared easily. He just never showed it." Robb poked the fire with a stick. "When this is over, things will be different." John's heart tightened. "Different how? We'll rebuild, stronger than before, and I'll make things right." John looked at him carefully. "Make what right?" Robb hesitated. That small pause said everything. "I know it hasn't been easy for you," Robb said quietly. "Growing up the way you did. I should have done more." John felt anger rise in his chest, sharp and sudden. "Done more? You were the heir. You had your own weight. That's not an excuse." Silence fell between them. Then Robb said something that shook him. "When the war is won, I'll legitimize you." John blinked. "What?" "I'd thought about it for a long time. You've proven yourself more than any man here. You deserve the Stark name, not as a favor, as a right." The world seemed to stop. For years, that was all John had wanted. A name, a place, recognition. And now Robb was offering it freely, too freely. "Why now?" John asked. "Because I trust you, because I need you, and because you're my brother." That word again. Brother. John felt something break inside him, but he couldn't tell if it was guilt or anger. Why now? Why after everything? Why after a lifetime of silence? Was it kindness, or was it because Robb needed him for the war? John stood suddenly. "We should rest. Battle will come soon." Robb nodded, not sensing the storm inside him. "We'll win this together. Together." John walked away from the fire and into the darkness beyond the camp. The trees stood silent, their branches heavy with frost. He leaned against one, breathing hard. If he betrayed Robb now, after that promise, it would not just be ambition, it would be treachery in its purest form. The next morning, horns echoed across the valley. The enemy had arrived. The battlefield stretched wide before them, frost covering the grass like a thin white sheet. Both armies lined up, banners rising, steel glinting under the pale sun. John commanded the vanguard as planned. His position was critical. His timing would decide everything. Across the field, he spotted movement among enemy riders. He knew one of them carried the signal that would confirm their deal, a red cloth tied around the arm. He found it quickly. The rider lifted his arm slowly. There it was, the moment. Robb's horn sounded, signaling advance. John raised his sword high. Forward, he shouted. His men charged. The ground trembled under pounding boots and hooves. Arrows filled the sky like a swarm of black birds. Steel crashed against steel. Screams erupted everywhere. John fought hard, too hard. He cut through enemies with wild force, almost losing himself in the violence. It was easier to swing a sword than to make a choice. Then he saw it. The left flank was pushing too far. Just like the message said, Robb was stretching his forces, pressing advantage. The center was thinning. All John had to do was slow down. Just a little. He pulled back slightly, shouting orders to regroup. His men hesitated, confused. The momentum shifted. Across the field, enemy cavalry surged forward, aiming straight for the exposed center. Robb was there. John saw his brother fighting fiercely, unaware of the danger closing in from the side. For a heartbeat, John froze. This was it. This was the point where history would change. If Robb fell today, the North would crumble. Chaos would follow. John could rise from it. He could claim leadership. The Kavam denied to him. He saw Robb's horse stumble under pressure, saw 3 enemy knights close in. And then something inside him snapped. Not ambition, not anger, but memory. 2 boys running through snow, sharing bread in secret, training until their hands bled. Brother, John roared and spurred his horse forward. With me! He shouted. He charged directly into the enemy cavalry, slamming into them with full force. His blade struck one knight down, then another. His men followed, crashing into the flank and breaking the charge. The center held. Robb turned, eyes wide, realizing how close death had come. Their eyes met across the chaos. John felt shame burn through him, because for a moment he had almost let it happen. The battle raged for hours, but the North eventually pushed the enemy back. Victory came at a heavy cost. Bodies covered the frost-covered field. As the sun began to set, Robb rode toward John, blood on his armor but alive. You saved me, Robb said, breathing hard. You saw it before I did. John forced a nod, but deep inside, he knew the truth. He had not saved Robb out of loyalty alone. He had hesitated first, and somewhere on that field, someone had seen that hesitation. The rider with the red cloth had escaped, which meant the enemy knew, and betrayal, once offered, does not simply disappear. It waits. The victory did not feel like victory. The men sang that night, raising cups of ale and shouting Robb's name into the cold air. Fires burned high, trying to push back the creeping darkness that seemed thicker than usual. The North had survived another day, but John felt like something had already died. He sat alone at the edge of the camp, cleaning blood from his blade. Most of it wasn't his. The steel reflected the firelight in broken flashes. His hands were steady, but inside, he was shaking. He had hesitated, only for seconds, but seconds were enough. If he had waited just a little longer, Robb would have been cut down, the North would have fractured, and John's path would have changed forever. Instead, he chose loyalty, or weakness. He didn't even know which it was anymore. Footsteps approached behind him, heavy, uneven. You fought well today. John recognized the voice before turning. Theon Greyjoy stood there, a cup in his hand, eyes sharp and unreadable. You should be drinking, Theon added. They're calling you a hero. John gave a faint smile. They're calling Robb a king. Theon snorted. Robb was nearly a corpse. John's grip tightened on his sword. Theon leaned closer, lowering his voice. I saw it, you know. John looked up slowly. Saw what? That moment. Theon's eyes narrowed. You pulled back. Not much. Just enough to make me wonder. Jon said nothing. Theon studied him carefully. Strange thing to do in the middle of battle. Almost like you were, thinking. The air between them grew heavy. You're imagining things, Jon said calmly. Maybe, Theon replied with a shrug, but I've known you a long time. You've always wanted something more than what you were given. Jon stood up slowly, careful. Theon smirked, but there was tension behind it. Relax. I'm not accusing you. I'm just saying, men don't hesitate like that unless they're weighing something. And what do you think I was weighing? Jon asked. Theon stepped back, finishing his drink. That depends. Do you want to stay a Snow forever, or do you want to become something else? Then he walked away. Jon stared after him, a cold wave spreading through his chest. Theon was not a fool. If he noticed, others might have too. And somewhere out there, the enemy rider who carried the red cloth was still alive. Watching. Waiting. The next morning, Robb called for Jon in his tent. The king looked exhausted but alive, fire burning in his eyes. Maps were spread across the table, marked with fresh ink and blood-stained fingers. We can't afford another mistake like yesterday, Robb said. Jon's heart skipped. Mistake? Robb nodded. The left flank pushed too far. I misjudged their numbers. If you hadn't reacted in time, we would have lost everything. Jon forced himself to meet his brother's gaze. We won. Yes, Robb said, because you were there. There was no suspicion in his voice, only trust. That trust felt heavier than armor. I've decided something, Robb continued. Jon felt tension crawl up his spine. When this campaign ends, I won't wait. I'll legitimize you immediately. I'll call the banners and make it official. You'll be Jon Stark. The words echoed in his head. Jon Stark. The name he had dreamed about. The name he had dreamed about. The name he had almost betrayed his brother to steal. You don't have to do that, Jon said quietly. I do, Robb replied. The North needs strong leaders, and I need my brother beside me, not behind me, behind me. The words stung more than they should have. Was that how Robb truly saw him? Always one step behind? A loyal shadow? Jon's silence stretched too long. Robb frowned slightly. You don't want it? Jon looked away. I've spent my whole life learning to live without it. And you shouldn't have had to, Robb said firmly. That wasn't your fault. Fault. Blame. Identity. Jon felt something dark shifting again inside him. The promise of a name suddenly felt like pity, like charity, like Robb was granting him existence out of kindness. Not because he deserved it. That night, another rider arrived under darkness. This one didn't hide. He rode straight into camp, holding up a white cloth. The guards seized him and dragged him before Robb's tent. Jon watched from the shadows as the man was forced to kneel. I carry a message, the rider said loudly. For Jon Snow. Murmurs spread through the camp. Robb looked confused. Speak. The rider smirked. The offer still stands, but now the price has doubled. The camp went silent. Jon's blood ran cold. Robb slowly turned his head toward him. What offer? Robb slowly turned his head toward him. What offer? Robb asked quietly. The rider laughed. He didn't tell you? How disappointing. Guards struck the man, but he kept smiling through blood. You hesitated, the rider continued, looking straight at Jon. You almost let him die. You know it. We know it. The words fell like stones. Robb's eyes searched Jon's face. Is this true? He asked softly. That was the moment. The moment where lies could save him. He could deny it, call it enemy manipulation, have the rider executed. But something inside him was tired. Tired of shadows, tired of pretending. Jon stepped forward. I was approached, he said. Gasps filled the tent. Robb didn't speak. They offered me a name, Jon continued. A title, land, power, and Robb asked, his voice barely above a whisper. John swallowed. The truth tasted bitter, and for a moment, I considered it. Silence, the kind that changes everything. Robb's face didn't show anger first. It showed hurt. That was worse. You considered letting me die, Robb said. John held his gaze. Yes. The word hung between them like a blade. The guard shifted uncomfortably. Even the air felt heavy. Robb looked away first. I trusted you, he said. I know. You're my brother. John's jaw tightened. Am I? That question cut deeper than any sword. Robb's expression hardened now, not with rage, with disappointment. You always were, Robb said, but I see now. Maybe I was the only one who believed that. The rider began laughing again, enjoying every second. Robb gestured sharply. Take him away. Hang him at dawn. The guards dragged the rider out. Then it was just the two of them. Robb looked at John one last time. You saved me in the end. I won't forget that. But I also won't forget the hesitation. John felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. I don't know who you are anymore, Robb said quietly. And that scares me more than the enemy ever could. He turned his back, and for the first time in their lives, there was no warmth left between them. Trust, once cracked, does not heal easily. And John had just broken something far worse than a battle line. Dawn came heavy and gray like the sky itself did not want to witness what was about to happen. The enemy rider was hanged at first light. The rope creaked. The men watched in silence. No cheers, no celebration, just a quiet understanding that something had shifted in their camp. John stood at the edge of the crowd, not because he wanted to watch, but because he knew he had to. The man had come for him, had tempted him, had exposed him, and now he swung lifeless in the cold wind. It should have felt like closure. Instead, it felt like the beginning. Robb did not look at John during the execution. In fact, he had barely looked at him since the confession. Orders were given through other commanders now. Messages delivered by messengers instead of by brother to brother. It was subtle, but it was clear. Jon Snow was no longer standing at the king's right hand. He was standing near the edge. That distance cut deeper than any accusation. By midday, scouts brought troubling news. A larger enemy force was moving east, trying to circle around them. If successful, they could trap Robb's army between two fronts. The commanders gathered inside the war tent. Jon entered last. The conversation quieted for half a second when he stepped in. Not long, but long enough. Robb stood over the map, jaw tight. He didn't greet Jon, didn't dismiss him either. Just continued speaking. If they move through the forest ridge, they'll cut off our supply line. We need to intercept before they reach it. One of the lords frowned. That ridge is narrow, dangerous ground. Yes, Robb replied, which is why we need someone capable leading that interception. Silence followed. Jon knew what was coming before Robb said it. Robb said evenly, you'll take 500 men and hold the ridge. 500 against a larger force. It wasn't a suicide mission, but it was close. Jon nodded once, understood. Their eyes met briefly. There was no hatred in Robb's gaze, but there was something colder now, testing, as if Robb was no longer sure whether he was sending his strongest ally or his greatest risk. The march to the ridge was quiet. Jon rode at the front, his men behind him. Some still looked at him with respect, others with doubt. Word had spread. It always did. He could feel it in their silence. They reached the forest ridge before sunset. The path was narrow, flanked by tall trees and uneven ground, perfect for an ambush, terrible for defense. Jon studied the terrain carefully. This was where loyalty would be proven, not with words, but with blood. As night fell, they saw torches in the distance. The enemy was coming. Jon gave quiet orders. Archers positioned high, spears hidden behind tree lines, horses pulled back. He could still walk away. He could pull back at the last moment. Let the enemy break through, claim it was overwhelming odds. Chaos happens in war. No one could prove intention. That dangerous thought returned again, soft, tempting. He closed his eyes briefly. Then he remembered Robb's face. Not angry, hurt. That expression burned more than any insult. The enemy entered the ridge just after midnight. Jon raised his hand. "Hold," he whispered. "Closer, closer." Then he dropped his hand. "Now!" Arrows rained down like black hail. The first wave of enemy soldiers fell screaming, spears thrust forward. The narrow path worked in Jon's favor, forcing the larger force to compress. The battle was brutal and close. Steel clashed in the dark. Men slipped in mud and blood. Jon fought at the front, not behind. He didn't hesitate this time. He fought like a man trying to erase a stain from his soul. Hours passed in chaos. By dawn, the ridge was littered with bodies. But it held. The enemy retreated. Jon stood breathing hard, armor cracked, blood running down his temple. Around him, his men looked at him differently now, not with doubt, with something stronger, respect. When they returned to the main camp, word had already arrived of the victory. Robb stepped forward as Jon approached. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other. "You held the ridge," Robb said. "Yes." "Outnumbered." "Yes." Another pause. Robb's voice softened slightly. "Why?" It was not a question about tactics. Jon understood. He could have given a political answer, a strategic explanation. Instead, he spoke plainly. "Because I was wrong." Robb's jaw tightened. "I let ambition blind me," Jon continued. "I thought about what I deserved instead of what was right. But I didn't betray you. Not in the end." Robb stepped closer. "But you almost did," he said quietly. "Yes." Silence hung between them again. War changes men, but doubt changes them faster. "I don't know if I can trust you the way I used to," Robb admitted. "That kind of crack doesn't just disappear." Jon nodded. "I know. But you fought for us last night. Truly fought." "I did." Robb studied him carefully. "The North doesn't need perfect men," Robb said. "It needs men who choose it when it matters." Jon felt something shift. Not forgiveness, but possibility. "You're still my brother," Robb added, though the words carried caution now. Not blind trust, earned trust, and that would take time. But as the army prepared to move again, Jon felt something different inside him. The temptation was still there, the hunger for a name, for recognition. But now it was mixed with something stronger, choice, and he had chosen. Yet somewhere far away, in another camp, another enemy commander was listening to reports. Reports that Jon Snow had hesitated once. Reports that doubt existed between him and his king. And in war, cracks are invitations. The next attack would not come with offers. It would come with precision. And it would aim straight at the space between two brothers who were no longer certain of each other. The next attack did not come with banners. It came with whispers. 3 nights after the ridge battle, the northern camp grew uneasy. Supplies began to disappear. Not enough to cause panic, just enough to create tension. A missing crate of arrows, a wagon wheel loosened. A sentry found asleep when he swore he hadn't closed his eyes. Small cracks, invisible hands. Jon noticed it before most. Men who once nodded respectfully now avoided eye contact. Conversations stopped when he approached, not openly hostile. Just careful. Doubt spreads faster than fire, and someone was feeding it. Inside Robb's war tent, tempers were rising. One of the northern lords slammed his fist on the table. "There's a spy among us." Robb's face was tight with exhaustion. "Do you have proof?" "No. But the enemy knew our patrol routes last night. They avoided every strong point." Another lord spoke carefully. "The enemy also knew about the ridge. They adjusted their numbers after our interception." Silence followed. Everyone knew what wasn't being said. Jon stood near the back of the tent. He didn't defend himself, didn't argue. He had already admitted his weakness once. That stain did not wash away easily. Robb finally spoke. "If there is a spy, we will find him. Until then, no accusations without proof." The lords nodded, but their eyes moved toward Jon anyway. Later that night, Theon approached him again. You feel it too, don't you? Theon asked quietly. Feel what? That they're watching you. Jon didn't answer. Theon sighed. You should have kept your mouth shut that night. Confession is noble. But noble men die early. I won't live as a liar, Jon replied. Theon gave a dry laugh. In war, that's ambitious. Before Jon could respond, a horn sounded from the outer camp. Short. Urgent. Jon turned instantly. Flames were rising from the eastern supply tents. Men shouted. Horses panicked. It was not an accident. Jon ran toward the fire, barking orders. Buckets of water, form lines, protect the food stores. In the chaos, he saw shadows moving between tents. Not northern soldiers. Assassins. A small trained group slipping through confusion. Jon chased one into the darkness beyond the campfires. Steel clashed as the figure turned, blade flashing fast and precise. This was no common soldier. They fought hard between trees, sparks flying with each strike. Jon barely blocked a slash aimed at his throat. You should have taken the offer, the masked attacker hissed. Jon's blood ran cold. You would have been king by now. Jon attacked harder, rage fueling his strength. The assassin slipped but recovered quickly. Your brother doubts you, the man continued. Your lords doubt you. We only need a little more pressure. Steel locked between them. You think loyalty will save you? The assassin whispered. They will turn on you the moment it suits them. Jon shoved him back violently. I made my choice. Yes, the assassin said calmly. You chose too late. Suddenly, another figure burst from the side, Theon driving his blade to the assassin's back. The man collapsed without another word. Theon pulled his sword free, breathing hard. Seems your past decisions are very persistent. Jon stared down at the body. This was not random sabotage. It was targeted, personal. Back at camp, the fires were controlled, but damage had been done. Food supplies were reduced, tension increased. Robb approached Jon as the body of the assassin was brought forward. He spoke to you? Robb asked. Yes. And Jon didn't hide it. They're trying to widen the crack. Robb studied the dead man carefully. It's working. That hurt more than Jon expected. You still doubt me, Jon said quietly. Robb met his eyes directly. I doubt the situation. I doubt the timing. I doubt that the enemy would try this unless they believed you were reachable. I'm not. But you were. The truth landed heavy again. Robb exhaled slowly. I need certainty, Jon. Not almost. Not hesitation, certainty. Jon, not almost. Not hesitation. Certainty. You'll have it. Robb's gaze sharpened. Then prove it. The next morning, Robb announced a bold plan. They would launch a direct assault on the enemy's main command camp before dawn in 2 days. A risky strike meant to break leadership and end the campaign quickly. And Jon would lead the spearhead. Not the flank. Not support. The spearhead. The most dangerous position. Again. Some of the lords exchanged uneasy glances. One finally spoke. Your grace, is that wise? Robb's voice was calm but firm. Jon Snow is one of our best fighters. Not brother. Not Stark. Just Jon Snow. Jon understood. This was not punishment. It was trial. If he broke now, everything would collapse. If he stood firm, the crack might finally seal. That night, alone in his tent, Jon thought about everything. About being a bastard. About wanting more. About almost throwing it all away. He realized something painful. He had blamed the world for making him feel lesser, but the hunger inside him was his own. No one forced him to consider betrayal. He chose to listen, and that meant the darkness was not outside. It was inside. Before dawn, 2 days later, the Northern Army moved silently through fog. Jon rode at the front, sword resting against his leg. This was it. Not just a battle, a reckoning. As they neared the enemy camp, horns suddenly blasted from within. They were ready, too ready. Arrows rained down immediately from hidden positions. It was an ambush. Men fell instantly. Jon's heart dropped. Someone had warned them, but not him, not Robb. Which meant the crack was wider than they thought. The spearhead faltered under heavy fire. Jon raised his sword and roared, charging straight into the arrow storm. For the north, if he died now, there would be no doubt left behind him. Steel clashed violently as northern soldiers broke into the camp. The fighting was chaotic and brutal. Jon carved a path toward the center tent, the command tent. He burst inside and froze. The enemy commander stood calmly, but he wasn't alone. Standing beside him, bound but alive, was Robb. Blood streaked across Robb's face, but he was conscious. The enemy commander smiled. "You were always the easier one to manipulate," he said softly. Jon's stomach dropped. "How?" he demanded. The commander tilted his head slightly. "You thought the crack was between you and your brother." He stepped aside slightly. "It was never you." Behind him, stepping from the shadows, was one of Robb's trusted lords, smiling. "The doubt you created," the traitor said calmly, "made everything easier." Jon felt the weight of it crash down on him. His hesitation had not broken the army. It had made it vulnerable. And now Robb was paying the price. The commander raised a blade to Robb's throat. "Choose carefully this time, Jon Snow." The blade at Robb's throat did not shake. The enemy commander held it steady, calm, almost bored. The traitorous northern lord stood beside him with a satisfied look, like a man who had finally chosen the winning side. Jon's sword felt heavy in his hand. Around the tent, battle raged, steel clashed, men screamed. The war had narrowed to this single breath. "Drop it," the commander said quietly. Jon didn't move. "If you rush me, he dies first." Robb was on his knees, hands bound behind his back. Blood trickled from a cut above his eyebrow, but his eyes were clear. Not afraid, not pleading. Just watching Jon. That hurt more than anything. "You hesitated once," the commander continued softly. "You nearly let him die for ambition. Now you can finish what you started." Jon's chest tightened. The traitor lord laughed lightly. "It's simple, Snow. Kneel. Swear loyalty to the true victor. Your brother lives as a hostage. You become warden of the North under our rule." There it was. Again, power, legitimacy. A name carved in stone. Jon Stark. All he had to do was bend the knee. Robb finally spoke. "Don't." His voice was rough but steady. Jon looked at him. "If you kneel," Robb continued, "they win. Not just the war, everything." The commander pressed the blade slightly closer to Robb's throat. A thin line of red appeared. "You see?" The commander smiled. "Honor is such a fragile thing." Jon's mind raced. If he attacked, Robb would die. If he surrendered, the North would fall. If he hesitated, no, not again. Jon slowly lowered his sword. The commander smiled wider. But instead of dropping it completely, Jon reversed his grip and threw it. Not at the commander, at the traitor lord. The blade struck deep into the man's chest before anyone could react. Chaos exploded inside the tent. In that half-second of shock, Jon lunged forward. The commander slashed downward, cutting Robb's shoulder instead of his throat, as Jon crashed into him. They fell together, rolling across the tent floor. Outside, northern soldiers were pushing into the camp harder now. The noise grew louder. Jon and the commander struggled violently. The man was skilled, fast, controlled. He drove a dagger toward Jon's ribs, but Jon caught his wrist just in time. "You could have ruled," the commander hissed. "I don't want to rule like you," Jon growled. He headbutted the man hard, stunning him, then grabbed a fallen blade and drove it through the commander's chest. The fight left the commander's eyes slowly. Silence filled the tent for a brief moment. Jon scrambled to Robb's side, cutting his bindings quickly. Robb gritted his teeth as he stood, blood soaking his sleeve. "You're bleeding," Jon said. "So are you," Robb replied. For a second, they just stared at each other. No crown, no army, just two brothers covered in blood. "You didn't hesitate," Robb said quietly. "No," Jon answered. Outside, the enemy camp was collapsing. With their commander dead and the northern traitor exposed, morale shattered. The northern forces overtook the remaining resistance. By sunrise, the battle was over. This time, the victory felt different. It wasn't clean, it wasn't glorious, but it was real, back in the northern camp. The surviving lords gathered. The body of the traitor was displayed for all to see. His betrayal confirmed. His alliance with the enemy exposed. The whispers shifted. They were no longer about Jon. They were about the man who had smiled beside Robb for years while planning his fall. Robb stood before his men despite his wound. "We were divided," he said loudly, "not by weakness, but by doubt." His eyes moved toward Jon briefly. "The enemy tried to use that doubt against us." He paused, "but when it mattered, we stood together." The soldiers cheered, not wildly, but firmly. Jon stood behind Robb, not in the shadows this time, but not reaching forward either. After the crowd dispersed, Robb approached him quietly. "You could have taken their offer," Robb said. "Yes." "You could have let me die." "Yes." Robb nodded slowly. "But you didn't." Jon looked out across the camp. "I wanted the name. I won't pretend otherwise." "I know. I wanted to stop feeling like I was standing behind you." Robb's voice softened. "You were never behind me." Jon gave a small, tired smile. "It didn't always feel that way." Robb stepped closer. "I can't erase your doubt," Robb admitted. "And I can't erase mine. But today, you chose us. Not ambition, not pride. Us." Jon swallowed. "I don't deserve the Stark name because of blood," Robb continued. "You deserve it because of choice." Jon looked at him carefully. "After this war ends," Robb said, "I will legitimize you. Not as a gift, not as a pity, but because you earned it." Jon felt something shift inside him. Not hunger, not jealousy. Peace. For the first time, the name didn't feel like something stolen. It felt like something built. "I don't need to fight for the North," Jon said quietly. "I know," Robb replied. "That's why you deserve it." They stood in silence for a long moment. The war wasn't over yet. More battles would come, more tests. But the crack between them had been sealed. Not perfectly, not without scars, but stronger than before. Jon had looked into the worst part of himself and chosen differently. As the northern banners rose in the morning wind, Jon Snow understood something he hadn't before. Honor isn't about never being tempted, it's about what you do when you are. And this time, he had not betrayed his brother. He had saved him.